Okay, we'll call this meeting to order at 6:32. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any agenda amendments?
Well, Chris, I'm not sure where to put this, but we have had 2 teachers resign, and I wanted to bring the board's attention to that. Typically, the board will accept the resignation, although you don't need to have action.
Right.
But I didn't know where you wanted to put that.
Good question. Let's see.
I could do it under correspondence since it's an email.
Yeah, let's do that.
Julie, does it require an executive session, or is it pretty straightforward public information?
I think it's public information.
Okay.
So we'll put it under correspondence, resignation. Any other amendments or reviews? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to public comments, which somebody with a phone number just joined. Not sure who that is.
Ty Swanier.
Hey, Ty, how's it going?
All right, yourself?
Not too bad. We're doing public comments right now. Do you have one?
Yes, I do. I have a couple of comments and a question.
All right.
First comment is for the Highgate Elementary School, the parking lot line striping and paving project has been completed by the looks. I spoke to Scott Martin about it the other day. I'm pretty discouraged that the completion of the walking path wasn't included in this project. We talked about it when it was Highgate School Board for about 2 years, and we were assured when the project happened that it would incorporate the walking path then. I'm pretty upset, to be honest with you, that a couple $100,000 project, or I don't know, I never saw the numbers of what it was, couldn't incorporate a $600 worth of line striping to make the walking path that the school kids use on a daily basis complete.
I can actually attest to that because I was on the Highgate board. The agreement we made was as long as we wouldn't lose parking spots, which we would lose parking spots if we.
But you have 50 some odd parking spots as overflow.
Finish, please.
Yeah.
So our agreement was as long as we didn't lose parking spots. So I've talked to Scott Martin about it. We're still looking at other alternatives, whether it's putting a crosswalk in and using the new sidewalk we just put in. That's one option. Another option is we'd like to talk to the landowners, and we have that space between our fence and their fence. It's about 6 feet wide. It's shared. It's their property, our property, but we'd be more than willing to work with you and put a walking path and line striping in to connect that to complete the walking path. But part of the parking lot project, we couldn't make it work without losing parking spots.
Right, and I would have thought that with the overflow in the arena, that would have losing 2 spots to gain 50 something in the arena parking lot if needed would have been all right. But as long as it's still on your guys' radar as a new MVSD board, because obviously it wasn't, it would have been nice to have it done now when that big project happened, but it's not something that I want dropped off the table at all.
It has not dropped off the table, Ty. It's just, we're trying to hurry up and squeeze this parking lot project in under the deadlines and COVID and trying to open schools. With no disrespect, your walking path wasn't top of our priority list, but it is still on our list.
Right. So next question I have for you is, was it just a time thing? I know part of the bond was the requirement to put the road behind the white building again as an emergency road.
Right.
Is that, it didn't happen when the equipment was there because of time, or?
We didn't include it in that project because while we had the parking lot all tore apart, we still had staff that needed to have access to the building. And we were worried that they would lose access if we didn't have that back entrance. There was a short period of time, I believe they used that entrance. I know they also parked in the Highgate parking lot and walked across, or the arena parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But when we were in the planning stages, we knew we had to have staff be able to have access to the building and places to park. So we kept the road behind the white building separate from the parking lot project.
Okay. And
so we also had to do that, I believe, because it would affect our stormwater permits.
Mm-hmm.
If we had included the road with the parking lot, made it all one project, I think it put us into a whole nother realm with our stormwater permits. Which
understand.
delayed
Yeah.
the project even more.
Okay. And then the only other question I have is, when does your board plan on going back to in-person meetings of some sort?
At this time, we'll be doing virtual indefinitely until the status level of our schools change. Because the hard part is if we go in the schools, we're not setting a very good example for what we're asking everyone else to do.
Okay. I didn't know if you guys were actively looking for a spot in the community that wasn't in a school. And I'm sure you guys are all in the same boat that you're sick of virtual meetings. But
oh, believe me, if I could get out of doing these meetings virtually, I would be the first one to sign up for it. I hate doing them.
I'm telling you right now, and I don't know if there's a way to fix it. Just me wanting to be on public comments tonight took me about 15 minutes to figure out how to get on. I finally found it in the agendas that were posted on your website. Mm-hmm. But so I'm sure you got more public that wants to be part of it, just are struggling to get the information.
Okay. Thank you, Ty. We'll see if we can put a better link on our website.
Okay. Okay. That's all I got for grapes tonight.
Thank you, Ty.
Yep.
Do we have any other public comments? Hearing none, we can move on to correspondence.
So we had two teachers. I put a copy of one email and then I just made a note for the other teacher. Let me just go and look. So, and I don't think we need to go into executive session because I don't think we need to get deep into people's reasons. If we did, then that does become more confidential. But we have a 0.6 SLP. She is going to be sending me a more formal letter. If she does that, I will happily forward that to the board for your review. She resigned verbally to our HR director and also in email. She's just has life circumstances where she just really feels this is the right decision. She was offered all of the options that there are, and I offered to speak with her and talk her through those options, as well as the long time that our HR coordinator spent with her as well. But she just decided it's the right thing for her at this time and made that decision. The other letter that we have is from Veronica Crone, who was our new hire for our ag science department. We're very disappointed, I think we're disappointed for Megan as well, but Veronica took another position in New York. So there really isn't much that can be done about that. If you take another position within Vermont, That's not allowed, and there's statute to prevent that kind of moving at the last minute between school districts. I'm not allowed to interview a teacher who's under contract, but there's nothing we can do about New York. It's a life change and a move and all of those things, which, we wish people well, but this is tough because it's been a very tough position to fill. And she was a really strong teacher. So we were very excited about her coming. So we're disappointed, but we'll just have to move forward.
Julie, she was a new hire. She's not the lady we had last year.
No, not Katie. She was new for the welding and the mechanics and other aspects of the program, and she's experienced. So we were hoping she was going to be helping us grow the program.
Okay. That's unfortunate.
It is, but I just know the nature of these positions. These are the kinds of things that somebody will stop you in the supermarket and let you know. So I wanted to make sure you you were aware of them.
Okay. Any other comments to the correspondence? Seeing and hearing none, we can move on to consent agenda, which we have the meeting minutes from August 4th. I'd entertain a motion to approve those. Terry's the first. Steve's the second. Any discussion? Seeing none. Now I don't see all the board members, so this one's gonna be a little trickier, but we can vote. I don't see Devin and missing somebody else. Who am I missing here? This is a pain.
Is it Terry? I can't see Terry.
Yeah, I've got Peter, Joanne, Megan, Steve, Don, Terry, and myself. So I list.
Are we missing Jen?
Yep, Jen and Devin. So if Jen and Devin could type their vote via chat, we'll vote on the meeting minutes for August 4th. All those in favor of accepting the meeting minutes, raise your hand.
I'll say aye, Chris.
Oh, there's Devin. He just popped up. All right, so that motion carries 9-0. Next up is a presentation. It's an informational superintendent administrative updates.
Okay, so I am going to see if I can pull up this presentation. Good. Are you seeing it? All right, I'm going to close the chat on the side. I've got two screens going, so forgive me. I will start, and then I also have Kosha and Tanya Hayes to also do part of the presentation. If you remember, when we were discussing the procedures and things that we need to make sure and assure the board that are being cared for, we have a couple of things that we want to make sure you see as a result, and we have a couple of updates, and I want to give you some, come on, Julie. I want to give you some updates as well. So first of all, the Strong and Healthy Start Guide was updated on August 11th. The steering committee has been looking through it. As Dina mentioned earlier, Justina has it memorized. Superintendents met last Friday to talk through some of the issues. We have some updated information that we'll be sharing as well. New teacher orientation happened last week, and in-service started in some schools yesterday. Today we have, I think everybody was back today. Tomorrow morning will be our big welcome and our keynote speaker. So far, in-service is well attended, and people are getting their questions answered. So it's moving forward positively. I wanted to make sure you know, we are advocating that the legislature adjust the school calendar. We have 179 student days in our contract, 187 teacher days. We typically have some snow days built in there and have teachers come for some in-service after school gets out. With the movement of the calendar back to September 8th for a first day of school, we are pretty much making sure that we have 12 in-service days before school starts. We have a few in-service days that are non-student days within the school year. We would be at 171 student days. If we don't get the legislators' approval, it looks like they're going to likely support going down to 170 student days. So I expect that our snow days will be remote learning days so that we don't have to lose a day of education. And I would expect that if something does happen, we will have to work with our in-service days or our vacation days and make that time up either during the year or after. But we are very close, and we are watching to make sure that we're within our contracted teacher days and managing our student days as well. So I wanted to make sure you were assured of that. I have a video here that I'm not going to share because we have a fairly lengthy agenda. And also, I hate videos of myself. I'll just, but I did want to let you know that it will be out there. My family, who generally could care less about all the videos that I do or whatever, like to make fun of one of the aspects where we all put our masks on one by one and say something a little bit corny. But all in all, really, I thought it was a terrific process. The superintendents of Franklin County and Grand Isle came together, worked with public access, had some local physicians and nurses tape segments about, making sure you stay home when you're sick, making sure you wear your mask and you wash your hands, making sure that, kids are staying apart from one another and the importance of following the routines in school. I think it's just a really nice public service announcement that will be helpful for families. It's all well and good for us to talk about routines and practices, but when your trusted pediatrician says, no, you really need to stay home when you're sick, that makes more of a difference. So I will make sure and share that with you when that goes out this week. What I do want to share with you, and I'll be sharing with staff in the morning, is that our steering committee has been working and looking at the guidelines. We are certainly not finished. I mean, they change and we have to look at everything all over again and make tweaks. But the regional superintendents have also come together and talked about what's best thinking in all of our systems. One of the things that's nice about that is not only are our like 25 plus people talking about these issues, but so are all of the teams in all of 16 different school districts, and we share everyone's best thinking, which really helps us sort of calibrate and focus on what's important. Now, the governor and Secretary of Ed and, Jane Nichols from VPA, all of them are talking about how we need to we'll be moving to step 3 on a certain date, and that's going to mean something. It's important that people understand that the steps don't have anything to do with whether you're in hybrid or whether you're back in full time. They never really were tied to that. The real difference between the steps is, the shalls become shoulds or encourage, or when possible. Between step 2 and step 3, things are a little more flexible. So we definitely will be looking forward to that call, because that's one of the things we need to consider, because they will move to that step when they feel that the environment is really solid and that the level of COVID is very low. As we know, it's probably the lowest in the country right now. But the school districts around our region have really come together and said, look, a week and a half, 2 weeks is not enough time for us to really practice our routines and procedures, getting kids in the building, checking kids as they come out of cars, as they come onto or off buses, all of those, the recess routines, the lunch routines, they all are going to take a lot of practice for students. Wearing masks, just following directions in ways that sometimes students don't always do, excuse me. So we really believe we also have other things to consider. Are those practices in place? Is our staffing stable? Do we have the teachers and support staff necessary to address it? We've been pretty lucky so far, although we do have some issues of staffing needs, but some school districts, really are struggling to get teachers who are reporting to work in person. So we do expect, however, that, and we want to make sure families know that should the conditions be right, we expect students pre-K through 5th grade to be able to come back to a 5-day-a-week model of instruction. Within 4, we'd like it to be 4, it could be 6. It really depends on, the college students coming back and whether that impacts the level of COVID in the community. Then the teachers being back in the buildings for so many weeks, what does that mean? The kids are then back part-time. So we're going to be really carefully examining each aspect and making that determination of a date certain, but we really want to be shooting for about 4 weeks, and we want to make sure that families know that. We very much expect that students in grades 6 through 12 will continue to be hybrid. And there will be more to come as we have more information, but that will be shared with families tomorrow, and I believe I have an interview with the messenger tomorrow as well that will be sharing that. So as always, I try and make sure the board gets that update first.
Sorry, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, I can't hear who that is. Megan?
It's Megan. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry. So for the pre-K through 5 going to full 5 days a week, if there are families who would prefer to maintain the hybrid option, can they do that? Or because we signed up for hybrid, are we going to have no choice in sending them back full time?
The only choice really was fully remote or coming back to school. So we can't have our teachers doing 2 things. It's, the model will be either in person or hybrid, and we fully expect that it will go back and forth a little bit. So we're starting in hybrid because that's what our public school is offering, because we think that's the safest and most appropriate way to start, sort of the slow start. But to do a part-time, that's not, there isn't a third option. We do expect that we will be hybrid, as I said, all year long for 6th grade and up, and that for younger students, we're following the science and the direction of the Department of Health that this is the best thing for our students and healthy for our teachers. So that's what we're going to offer. A third option is not, we don't have the staff to do that. We can't have teachers doing 3 different things. Obviously, individual circumstances, if a child needs to be quarantined with their family, or if a student becomes ill, COVID or not, teachers send work home. That's what teachers do. So there will always be those kinds of circumstances. But the public school option for those grade levels will be what the decision is. And we do expect, as I said, perhaps in February during the heat of flu season, we might have to go back to hybrid again. I'm hoping that we don't have to go to a full closure. As a state, I don't expect us to. I expect we could have a closure for a day or 2 days and go to remote on those days, and then go back to the classroom the next day. Chris, I see Peter. I can't see if you're frozen or.
I can't see.
You see Peter?
Julie,
Shout.
I've got a question. I saw the video today, and there was a scene with the father and son getting ready to go out the door for school, and the son had an app that he was filling out the questionnaire for the COVID question.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that's going to be available?
We've discussed that. It was neat that it was shown in our video. I don't know where you saw it. It's not supposed to be released until you have like a secret connection. Not supposed to be released till tomorrow at 5 o'clock. But we are not doing the app, and I do know that some of the school districts that purchased the app, then they were having trouble with the app. And there was a cost associated with it. And then one of the things we found out in the updated guidance is that we don't actually need to track the questions. We just need to build routines with families to make sure that they are doing that themselves. And then we have to take everyone's temperature. So we're still working through the logistics, but an app, it just didn't seem to be the right choice for our families.
No, I was just curious.
No, it looked great on the video.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to move on. We did talk a little bit. Oops. So we have basically, to get at Megan's question a little more deeply, we have 2 models to start school. One is the pre-K-12 hybrid model, which will shift to at some point in the future, should conditions, I feel like I'm qualifying everything I'm saying. Should conditions be right, we'll move to a pre-K-5 in person and a 6-12 hybrid. One of the most important things is that people look at the guidance. I put a link there for the guidance that we put out last week. And schools are developing their own specific schedules and what that will look like. You know, MVU put together a document about their schedule and what it will look like. I wanted to call your attention more to the virtual academy. We're trying to call it a virtual academy to distinguish it from the remote days of hybrid learning. And COSHA developed the new, initials because we don't have enough of those in public education. But Missisquoi Valley Virtual Academy. So when you see that MVVA, that's what that's for. And it is 100% virtual online. It is running through the Vermont Virtual Learning Collaborative. We received all of our applications. They were to be final last Tuesday, so a week ago. We still have a little bit of tinkering of some folks who are saying that they don't want to do it, or they signed up twice, or all of those things that we have to work through. But it really is closed because we had to have one teacher designated, so removed from instruction, for every 20 students that enrolled. We were very lucky enough, I cannot say enough about our administrators who really went out of their way to make sure they found every teacher that was available and that could make a shift. We accommodated some people's needs who wanted remote work. We had teachers that typically do a different thing, but under these new conditions, that probably won't be happening in the same way. So we had teachers who changed grade levels from what they were expecting. And I just can't say enough that we were able to find 8 teachers so that we had enough teachers to accommodate every request. We went around and round, it was, I'll show you the next slide really shows down here, it was about 51% of families had a medical condition or someone in their family did. And 48, almost 49% had didn't have a medical condition, but they really felt strongly about 100% online option for their child. And those families, and we still have families who are homeschooling, and that is obviously a choice for families to do. But we can't continue to give up teachers, so we can't keep adding folks to this model. But we were able to sort of stem the movement, or I'm mixing metaphors as I'm wont to do, but we really wanted to mitigate loss of students to homeschooling to the greatest extent possible. And I just really want to thank Yeshua and Jen and Dan and Dina and Justina and Chris for the work that they did, because not only did we have to give up teachers, we also had to find coordinators. So between our three larger schools, we were really able to find those people. And it actually sort of met the proportions of where the students were. Because obviously, if you are having 60 students leave your building, then you can make some shifts, right? But as we often say, when people talk about declining enrollment generally, it's not like all the kids in a certain grade level just certainly choose something different. But we were able to make those changes. And I honestly, it was a piece of work. And I know there were lots of sleepless nights. So I need to point that out to you. So that's all of the talking I'm going to do. I would like Kosha to really speak a little bit about how we're going to make sure that the board is assured that we're meeting the instructional hours. It's important that we have 51% of our students so we can call it a school day. We're no longer, well, we are in a state of emergency till the middle of September, but the rules are not the same as they were in the spring. So we want to make sure that you have this overview. So Kosha, you just tell me when you want me to advance slides.
Sure. Yep, we can go to the, yep. So one of the things that we have to do this year with this unusual situation is to track attendance. And it's going to be a little tricky because, as Julie has been describing, we have some of our students in the hybrid model who are in our buildings. On those same days, we have students who are at home, remote learning, and then we have a group of students who are in the virtual academy. So it's a big challenge to be able to track students who are, in different modes of instruction. One of the things we talked about yesterday, Laura, Robert, Dan, Julie, and myself, is how do we track attendance? Because this year it's going to be absolutely critical, because one is for safety reasons. If students are supposed to be in person, how do we know that they are actually in the building? That is going to be really important to make sure that we are able to track those students. The second reason is food service, and Laura can do a much better job of explaining it, but there is a very strong connection between our attendance records and the reimbursement that we are going to get from the state for food. So say, for example, if we have a certain number of kids in the building, but the number of meals accessed is greater than the number of kids who are present, we lose money because we can't get reimbursed for those students. So we have to create a tracking system whereby those students who are learning remotely at home are doing one of these things, which you can see on the slide. So they can log into and do a video chat with a staff member. They could be talking on the phone with a staff member, emailing a staff member, participating in synchronous morning meeting, or they could be logging into their LMS. So it could be Seesaw, Dojo, Google Classroom, whatever learning management system is being used in their classroom. As long as they log in, they would be considered present that day. And then finally, these are paper and pencil assignments that students might have taken home after their in-person day and the teachers ask them to do some work at home. They could be submitting those through taking a picture or something like that. So these are the different ways in which a student would be considered present on a remote learning day. If you can go to the next slide, please, Julie. So we also need to really track attendance because we want to make sure students are accessing learning and that we are also tracking truancy. So say, for example, consistently a student is absent, we need to figure out what's going on. One of the suggestions that Tanya had come up with, because that's what they do in special education, is to assign a case manager. So our students with IEPs already have case managers, but we are thinking of the students who need multiple supports, whether it's through intervention services, it could be that they are on a behavior plan, but they're receiving multiple different kinds of supports. And so that case manager could be an interventionist, it could be somebody from the behavior team, and they are the people who would be checking in with those students on remote days if they haven't done any of the things we stated before, that there's been no contact. The reason we decided to go with this model is there were many families in spring who felt overwhelmed by the number of people from school who were calling them, emailing them, and it just got too much. So instead of having multiple people calling a family, we thought that having this case manager model would be much easier for students as well as their families. And then once the case manager checked in and was able to find out that the student did meet with the interventionist or email somebody from the behavior team or whatever other supports they were getting, could be an SLP, physical therapy, OT, they would then communicate that with the classroom teacher who would then be able to change their status from being absent to present. So there will be some kind of communication mechanism, either through a spreadsheet or a Google Sheet, and that information would be shared by members of the team so that students would be able to be accurately represented if they were present in some way. Julie, if you can go to the next. Yeah, perfect. So the last thing is, sometimes students are not at home on their remote days, especially when you think of our younger kids. They might be at a grandparent's home, they could be at daycare, they could be at a relative's or friend's house because the parents are at work and they cannot log into the LMS. They are unable to take a phone call or participate in morning message. We don't want to penalize those students because a lot of the families have told us we probably can get to that work on, say, a Friday, which is a remote day for our child, and we are going to make up that work on weekends. So in order to accommodate those needs of our families, what Robert explained is we can keep Power School open until Monday morning, and a teacher comes in on Monday morning and checks in. A student submitted some work over the weekend. Their status could then be changed from absent to present. So we are perfectly understanding if students are able to just work on weekends or submit work, especially with our high school students, who many of them might be having a job and might be working during the day. And if a student attempts all of their assigned remote learning assignments, the teacher would mark them present for all their remote days. So we are trying to make sure that our needs are met, because we know how critical keeping that attendance is going to be for all the reasons I mentioned before: student safety, the food service numbers, and just making sure that students are receiving the instruction that they should be deserving. So that's what we've come up with so far. We are going to see, how things work out, and then make any changes if needed. We do have to ensure that students are meeting the minimum instructional hours required by the state, which is increased a lot since springtime. Pre-K and K is 10 hours a week. Grades 1 and 2 is 20 hours a week. And then grades 3 through 12 is 27 and a half hours a week. So we have to be able to make sure that we are meeting those minimum requirements. So that's the overview of the attendance and what we are doing to track the attendance. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer based on what we know right now. Otherwise, on to Julie.
Thank you, Kosha. Tanya is next. She's been working tremendously hard with the guidance as it trickles in through the summer. There has been a lot of conflicting guidance, very difficult to work through special education in this environment, and she's done a tremendous job in working with her teachers on what this will look like. But we thought it would be an opportunity for the board to see what the plan so far is. Take it away.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. Julie, I think we're ready for the next slide, please. Thank you. So I just wanted to give you a basic overview of kind of what we've been working on over the summer with regards to special education, and then give a little context about where we were sort of last spring and where we're headed, because special ed is so contextual that I just kind of want to review those two sort of things, and then really talk about FAPE and IEPs. And FAPE is our free appropriate public education, and that's sort of the heart and soul and the basis for everything special ed, and how we're having to look at that now in our various learning environments, and what that means for shifting in plans and what we're doing as a department. And then there's some other things that kind of go along with that, and other work we're doing, and then our next steps. Next slide, please. Thank you. So over the summer, as Julie said, I met weekly. Our state director of special ed had weekly check-in meetings with all the special ed directors in the state. So we would meet every Friday and kind of get an update on where things were at. Likewise, I was participating on the teaching and learning task force, specifically with our other building administrators. And one of the questions we were tackling as a task force with teaching and learning was around how are we going to provide services for special ed in a safe way, because the nature of services can sometimes be so different than they're specialized. So we're trying to figure out how do we do that and ensure that we're doing that safely in accordance with the guidelines. I met quite frequently with the Franklin Grand Isle special ed directors. We collaborate very often regionally. Our large region is the Champlain Valley, but then at our small Franklin Grand Isle County, we really work closely together because we share the community, basically, the larger community. And then I worked with my special ed leadership team, which are it's a small team within the district of teachers and other administrators. And we worked to develop our guidelines and our process for returning to school, as well as we worked simultaneously. We're kind of looking ahead at some of the other things that we've been wanting to work on. So we also worked on a professional development series for our paraeducators. Aside from COVID-19 and returning to school, we were working on that so that we that's been one of our goals. We worked on that. And we had extended school year services this July, and we were able to have students in person for the first time since last March. So that, and though there were only a few students that were able to come in person and the rest were remote, it felt good to have kids in our building and to know we can do it and to see how that was going to play out. So that was kudos to those building administrators and the staff that were able to have the kids back in. So that worked out well. So in terms of just orienting ourselves and situating within special ed, I feel like it's helpful to kind of look back to sort of remember that during the period from March to April, when schools were closed, special ed did not have services. So the general ed services were put on hold, which then meant special ed services were put on hold. So there was there were no IEP services being offered during that time. However, when we moved from April 13th into June, we were then in that continuity of learning phase, and we did provide special ed services, though they looked very different, obviously, than they did in the school year. And so during that time, we had amended all of our IEPs and used a format called a distance learning plan in order to articulate what services were being offered and how we were meeting students' needs within that virtual learning environment. And so likewise, during that period of time, we couldn't provide in-person services. We also could not do or perform our evaluation. So typically students on IEPs are evaluated, they're reevaluated every 3 years. And so we have numerous deadlines and timelines and time frames that we need to stick within. And we were not able to do that in the remote environment. We just simply couldn't assess students. So we followed procedures and we were able to delay many of those evals, or we were able to use some other forms to say, well, we're just finding those students eligible right now, but knowing in the fall we need to come back and reevaluate them. So that sort of has built a situation where we're going to return in the fall with a number of evaluations that we'll need to get caught up on. So not only the ones that are coming due this year, but also the ones from last spring that are sort of on hold. So we'll have that work ahead of us. We were doing ample data collection during that time period because we really just wanted to make sure, are we meeting the needs of students right now in this remote environment, and who aren't we meeting the needs for, and what's going to happen, come fall, how are we going to manage that? So really we had various forms of data collection and staying in touch with families. So all that to say, that's kind of the backstory of where we were with special ed. Now moving into the fall, we're still continuing to get that AOE and health department guidance. And as we, every week when I still go to my check-ins, I hear, all right, so this is what's coming and we're going to issue some guidance around this. But in some cases, the guidance takes a while to get back out because it has to go through so many chains at the Department of Ed. So for example, right now I'm still waiting, right? We heard a few weeks ago that there's new guidance coming around the use of restraint. Well, we don't have that guidance in our hand yet, though I know it's going to look a little different than it normally does because restraint requires close proximity to students. It usually involves students who are escalated, and so there's guidance that we're waiting on, and that's an example of one of those pieces. So as that comes, we quickly try to pull it apart and apply it to what we're doing, and then help the staff figure out how does that fit into the plans that we have existing. So the other piece is that as we look at the stage 1, 2, and 3 planning, or our school plan, IEPs need to get built for those 3 different scenarios, basically. Because special ed is contextualized within general education. So if gen ed is remote, or if general ed, which is just our environment, changes, the IEP necessarily has to change in order to continue to meet the child's need within that new environment. So that's the constant juggle we're doing with looking at those plans. So this fall, that is what the next couple of weeks, that is what we will be doing, is amending those IEPs. Okay, next, Julie. So when I refer to FAPE, that is that free appropriate public education. And that is, like I said, sort of the heart and soul and the basis for special education. And the reason special ed exists is to offer students a free appropriate public education. And so the IEP document is the offer or the sort of contract that gets developed in order to offer that FAPE for families and for students. And that needs to be reasonably calculated to ensure that educational benefit in light of the circumstances. So what's been difficult and challenging and what we need to continuously sort of keep in mind in these circumstances are that the pandemic, the school closures, the virtual learning, all of those things constitute the new circumstances. So we are continually having to ask ourselves, what are the individual child's needs? And how do we account for them and meet those needs in whatever the new environment and situation might be. And as that environment keeps changing, we need to amend and adjust IEPs. And within that, the extra layer right now is we amend the IEP, and what we might have had in our toolbox, you know, prior to last March, or as long as we can remember, in terms of how to support students, some of those things just aren't accessible to us right now because they don't fit within the current health and safety guidelines. So that's another layer or another barrier that we're just juggling a little bit. So we look at the child's needs. How do we account for that within this environment? And then what can we do and what can we use that also fits within those health and safety constraints? So that's the work that we're having to think about. And so I just kind of put on here, so we're ensuring the IEP is appropriate. We need to, as a special ed department, and case managers will be working through this in the next couple of weeks. We have about 350 students on IEPs in our district. All of those will need to be amended and reviewed in the next couple of weeks prior to September 8th when kids come back through our door. We need to have those IEPs ready to go. And so we're looking again, just what I said, we're looking at that current context, and kind of Julie already went through what the basic context is, you know, our hybrid model and our gen ed environment. What we need to pay a particular attention to as it applies to children with disabilities is that oftentimes the nature of their disability makes it difficult for them to even access the virtual learning, or they need support to access their learning, or in person or virtually. So we have to take those pieces into account. So in both learning environments, we need to figure out how do we get them access and how are we going to provide their specialized instruction. So some of that sometimes happens in person and some of that will happen virtually, but those discussions will all happen at that IEP team level. So the child's team with the special educator facilitating that discussion will really be looking at, here we are in this particular school on this particular team with these health constraints. Here's the child's needs. How are we going to support their access and participation in both the in-person and the virtual learning opportunities? Next, Julie. Other pieces that we're working through related to that are, as I said, keeping in mind those safety guidelines. We have children that require personal care to access their school day or access their learning. And one of the hurdles we're having to manage is the physical distancing self-safety guidelines. The Agency of Ed has, acknowledge that, yes, some children will need that level of support, and that doesn't fit within our safety guidelines in terms of 3 feet or 6 feet. And we will need to increase the personal protective equipment that, is that the right word? PPE? Yep. We need to increase that in order to make sure that our staff are safe, but the child gets what they need as well. We are having to juggle, do service providers push into classrooms or can they pull out? We can't cross-contaminate students. So really we want service providers pushing in as much as we can. In some cases, that's not appropriate. And so we do need to pull them out, but then we need to disinfect before we have another child using the same space. So it's that kind of logistics that we're working through. Our occupational and physical therapist, as well as our English language learner teacher, all travel between all of our buildings. They have children they see in all 4 buildings, in many classrooms. So we've had to sort of rethink how we're utilizing them, and to the extent we can, having them not cross buildings, maybe use more virtual or consultative services, or concentrate services in one building one week, another building another week or month, or however it works, but having to get creative so we're not cross-contaminating with those staff. Same thing with our special educators and SLPs, right? That crossing classrooms is what we've had to consider. We are waiting on some additional guidance from the Agency of Ed around something called that they have recently put out to us called COVID recovery services. It's not something clearly that's ever existed before, and recovery services in general isn't a term that gets used in special ed. But I think it's really the Agency of Ed looking sort of back to see what, having us consider what happened last year and what may children have missed out on through schooling and or IEP services. And they're having us give some consideration to that, and whether or not we as an LEA, as a district, need to then supplement their schooling this fall in order to sort of make up for what might have been lost, right? So it's this, everything I've been talking about so far is us getting ready to look forward to provide the free, appropriate public education. AOE is also asking that we're giving consideration to what they missed out on last year. And so, like I said, we've gotten some guidance. It's been a little bit confusing for people in the field, and there's some indication to say that we may have we're hearing there's going to be more guidance around that. So we know what is our obligation, what could that look like, how would we provide additional services when we're already trying to provide the services that kids get now. So there's some questions about that, but we'll be getting more information on how we would go about doing that. And that is something that looks like we would not implement those services until maybe into the first marking period, or after we've had a chance to have kids back in the building to see where are the gaps. Can we measure and can we identify what did they miss out on so that we know what to supplement? So that will be down the road. And I mentioned the other guidance. The other consideration for special educators right now is that we do have students with IEPs that are accessing the Vermont, the Missisquoi Valley Virtual Learning Academy. And so for those students, if they're receiving some special ed services, VTVLC does not provide special education. So our case managers need to be able to coordinate and collaborate with those virtual teachers from VTVLC, and also to then provide the direct special ed services to them virtually. So our teachers will be serving our students that we have hybrid. They'll also be serving and case managing and providing special ed services to the kids who are fully remote. So we've got a little bit of a two things going on there. It's possible that there will be other students that may be choosing remote only that don't access, or because of the nature of the disability cannot access VTVLC at all. And in that case, our special educators would be providing that solely for them in collaboration with the rest of that team. So I put upcoming training needs. I don't see what's on the bottom of that slide. Oh, I think it has to do with as we think about amending our IEPs, there are new forms that the agency is having us use, and that has to do with that idea of having a plan for special ed services now as we enter school, but also planning for what if. So we will have two maybe additional pages in the IEP, or two different scenarios that we're sort of thinking ahead. Okay, so if we go fully virtual, what will the services look like? If we get to come back more in-person time, what will they look like? So we'll have to think about all those scenarios. And I think that basically covers it. This is kind of what we're working on right now. We have special educators are meeting with me tomorrow afternoon, and we'll be, again, sort of diving more in depth with many of these pieces and supporting them to hold those meetings. So we'll be sending out a letter to parents the day after tomorrow, letting them know, here's what's coming, here's what you could expect. We're going to be having we'll be having meetings for your child, and be looking to have that input and really develop the IEPs that can smoothly transition kids back into the school year. I think that's all I have to say. Are there questions about any of that?
Tanya, Don
Mhm.
Collins,
Hi, Don.
is it realistic to think you can get these last year's evals and this year's evals caught up without additional staff?
Well, we are budgeting some of our special ed funds to contract out for a handful of evals. So at MVU in particular, we have quite a backlog, and they're down a whole special educator. So we're offsetting the funding that we would use for the special educator, some of that funding to go toward contracting an evaluator to pick up some of those assess evals for us. So, I mean, I think it'll be tough, but
Well, I thank you.
we've got a plan.
Depending on what you said, I was thinking maybe we should start thinking of staffing, but it looks like you have it all planned out.
Yeah.
I know Tina would love to have, it's hard to find special educators, especially at this time of year.
What I was thinking, Julie and Tanya, is the way the teacher retirement system is, there are some retired people out there, special educators, that could probably work at least a third of a year without impacting their things. I'm sure you've already thought about it, but I know it's going to be a big challenge.
Right. And so when I had, special educators were really last spring, just got their list together. And so we have a pretty succinct list of whose evals got delayed, who needs them right away, we've sort of prioritized. And then we've got this contracted service provider that will help us out with some. So I think we have a plan. We'll see how it goes.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Dina, I appreciate what you're putting in the chat. Tanya has done, we're so very lucky with her leadership, because this is uncharted territory and legally uncharted territory. And in some cases, the legal guidance is coming out sort of after the decisions are being made at the state level. So I really appreciate your ability to navigate it and to work so closely with your teachers.
Thank you.
Chris, I think that's all we had, which is a lot, but we wanted to make sure that we're informing the board.
Okay. Terry.
Thank you. I was wondering, because this is great. You all have caught us up on so much tonight so quickly, and really appreciate it, because these are the kind of questions we're going to be getting. I do have one other question, and that is just seeing truly, these are military operations, everything you guys have to do. It's amazing. But seeing all this that went into special ed, et cetera, and for those services, what about kids that don't receive the special ed services? Are they supposed to be, I think you called it, I forget what the word was, missed out on, or I forget what the word was. I know you don't use it. Probably, but so what about the kids that don't have those services? Because I can imagine, just like your teachers are overwhelmed, I would imagine all of them are. And Dina's saying all this nice stuff, but she's probably doing the same thing as all the principals are with their teachers. So do we have to, I'm sure we're going to get questions about that. Is there going to come a time when you have enough on that you could fill us in on that too?
Well, I think just briefly what I would say, Terry, is that I think that is the very essence of some of the questioning back to the AOE around the guidance, because the idea of recovery services for special ed is kind of like, yeah, but what about everybody else? I think all of us are understanding that most everybody has sort of missed out on or may have gaps due to disrupted educational opportunities last spring. And so I think that's where our MTSS system in our schools is really going to work well for us. And though that system is around, we're getting all kids in, we're going to find out where all kids are and where those gaps are. We're working to sort of bring the kids to the next level, whoever they are, whatever they are, whatever plan they might have, right? Whatever school they're in. So I think that's where that system will play a role. And I don't know what principals would have to say if there's anything additional, but that's a great question.
That's really helpful, what you just said. I don't know if the principals do want to say anything. They're all looking down.
I think the issue is there. It doesn't necessarily mean we have additional staffing or additional funding for some of these things, right? It's a matter of prioritizing what we do have and filling in those gaps to get to. We know where we want to get kids. It's just bumping them.
I can add a little bit to that. One of the things our math and literacy coaches worked on in June was to really identify for each unit of study, what are some of the prerequisite skills that students are going to need to be successful? Because just what Tanya said, you can't take all the kids and give them recovery services because everybody missed out on instruction in springtime. And so what we're going to do is going to be more like an inbuilt system where, say, for example, in second grade, unit 1 of reading, before the teachers actually start teaching that unit, they'll be doing a pre-assessment and figuring out which kids have those prerequisite skills in order to be successful in that unit. And then they're also going to identify kids who have bigger gaps. And so even before they start teaching the unit, they'll spend a few days getting those kids caught up and ready to learn the current grade levels instructional material, because we just can't go back and teach every single grade level all the things that they missed in springtime. And so our coaches worked over 3 full days in June, and every unit from kindergarten to 9th grade, they figured out what was. Sorry, I don't know where that came from. But basically, they did figure out what those prerequisite skills are, and they're going to use those to help identify needs.
I think it's because Don has 2 windows open. That's why we're getting such wicked feedback.
Okay. So, Terry, I hope that answers your question, because we've been thinking about the same thing and saying we've got to be able to identify student needs, but we also can go back and teach them what they were missing from last year.
Thank you.
Everybody needs to mute.
Everybody needs to mute.
Don, I think you have 2 sessions open and one is not muted. Don, I think you have 2 sessions not muted.
Well, it seems to have stopped. I think, Chris, I think that's it for us.
Oh,
And I know that was long, but thank you.
okay. I don't believe there's any more questions or comments, so we will move on to. I don't believe there's any more questions or comments, so we will move on. Don, is there any way you could close that second session you have open, because it's causing wicked feedback?
Screen says I'm unmuted,
Okay.
but I lost the connection.
Well, I can actually remove Don a second.
Unmuted.
I can remove Don. And then I think it should be okay.
There we go. I think we're all set now. Okay, we're moving on. So now we're on to new business. First up is formation of a facility task force. When Julie and I were setting up the agenda, we decided to call it a task force instead of a committee, because if we do decide as a board to form a task force / committee, at least a task force is something not permanent. A committee is something we can try out. Sorry, I got that backwards. Committee is something permanent. Task force something we can try out, see if it works, see if it greases the wheels and makes things a lot smoother in these meetings. So Peter and Don were the ones who requested the facilities group, so I guess I'll let them take this one.
Chris, the only
Don, do you want to start, or do you want?
I guess I just all I want to say is the reason I raised the issue is that MVU, largest school in the district, usually having more maintenance issues than other buildings, found that by having whatever you want to call it, task force, committee, whatever, that scheduled, we usually met once a month to talk about facility issues, 30 minutes earlier than the regular meeting. And anybody who wanted to come could. Any board member wanted to participate, but there were board members that was part of their responsibility. They weren't on the finance committee, they weren't on negotiations, but they were on the facilities committee. And that's the only reason I raised it, because I think that it worked. Now, maybe with what Julie and Laura are doing with your people now works, but I still think there have been times when the board was kind of left out of the loop based on what we'd previously done. And so I think we have to make a decision what our roles are as a board when it comes to facilities. And I just felt that model worked for many years at MVU. It might be worthwhile looking at it.
Peter?
Yeah, I would just like to see us have earlier involvement in these projects, so we can have input before we're at a point where we're asking for money or approving money for the projects. I just think it would flow better, and I think it would work out better for the administrators and the the grounds people, that if we're involved early, there shouldn't be surprises down the road. So that was my thinking.
Anyone else?
Going along with that, Chris, during my years as a school administrator, I seldomly had anybody come in and question our history curriculum or what we were doing in phys ed or even math, sometimes in science. But a lot of people in the community knew what our buildings looked like, how clean they were, what maintenance projects were on board, why the roof was allowed to leak for 5 years before they replaced it. So it's just, I guess my experiences are that that's something very visible to the public. And not that we should be out there micromanaging, but at least we should know before the thing is ready to cook.
Terry?
Okay, thank you. I understand what you all are saying. I'm just, while we're talking about, what we want to be doing, I know from looking at the job description, the superintendent is responsible for facilities. And I do believe that over the years, each one of us in our individual schools had tried to come up with these plans, the maintenance plans. And that could be done from some of the things you're saying, that when you were on the board, you guys worked really hard to make sure these things happened. And so I'm wondering about going forward, when we're asking for what kind of information we want as a board. I thought that it was the different schools were working so well together now and had such a range of expertise that they were able to give us reports ahead of time or give us plans ahead of time. So I'm not quite sure what it will still be missing and what we want to front load into the reports, as opposed to backloading into details for us. Does that make sense?
No.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, if they give us a plan and if we get those updates monthly from them, I don't know what would be a surprise if it's all in the plans. Like, what kinds of things are you and Peter thinking of?
No, what you just said, Terry, makes sense. What you said before didn't register with me, but if we do. But I want to go back to something that came out at the annual meeting, and I don't know if it was the one where I attended in Franklin or if it was one that we had somewhere else. But we said next year in our annual report, the maintenance people should have a page.
Yep.
And so I think it's an information sharing. And then when it comes to specific projects, it's great when we build the budget and people say, oh, we're going to put 18,000 or 15,000 this for that. In my mind, it shouldn't end there. After the budget is passed and we're moving forward, and I agree with Peter, there maybe should be a review by each person head of maintenance with the board, or if there's not a committee, saying, okay, remember I put this money in November or December in the budget's passed. My plan is go out to bid in May or whatever, so that there's not a surprise that comes up.
I certainly agree that we need to not have there be surprises. This year was it was a unique year. We were building a new school district. We were creating the new processes. We built the budget on estimates of projects, and then COVID environment happened, and we had to change a lot of our projects. So, and we're still making sure that our facility guys, directors, are really communicating well with central office, and the principals we're all communicating about our priorities and what we can move forward with and what we can't. And I know that this is a really visible area. I think Don's point there, people don't, I think I said something to someone earlier today, people don't comment on, I see you got some new Chromebooks, but they do say, well, you're tearing down a shed, or you've got a backhoe over by the high school. What's going on there? I very much understand that. But I do also want to make sure that whatever we do, it makes it clear for the administrators, for Laura and myself, to, that individual board members aren't directing facility directors, but that we are having a process that is comfortable for everyone, that people feel informed, and that we bring together a process so the board feels like it has the right information, that they know what projects are going in the budget, that we report to you when those projects are getting kicked off or getting changed and reprioritized, and that obviously we come to you when there are bids and with updates as things are completed. So, we want to make sure that whole cycle happens, because otherwise, I think we could, this is one aspect of a school district budget, and I just want to make sure that our roles and responsibilities are all really clear, because it makes it difficult if Laura and I have to sit there and say, are we allowed to do this with the fence? Aren't we allowed to do this? I'm not sure. What does the board think? It's the lack of clarity that's the worst. We really want to work with what makes you comfortable.
Peter.
I think that's the whole point of putting a committee or a task force together, is for more clarity. Mm-hmm. The intention isn't for the board to take over these projects in any way. It's, I think, what we saw before when we had individual boards, the board members knew exactly what each project is. Now there's so many projects because there's so many different buildings. I would like personally to be able to, you bring them to the board. I'd like to actually go and see, like we did with the Swanton project, physically look and see what we're doing. It gives us a lot, at least myself, a lot more comfort in seeing a project and what it's doing and what the expense of that project is. I just think if we had a task force, at least those on the task force would be able to see the projects and what they're doing, and not saying that we wouldn't have input, but we're certainly not running the projects or trying to control them. It would just be ideas. And I don't think it hurts to have different ideas presented. So that's my thought. It's for more clarity, not less clarity.
Thank you.
And Julie, going back to wanting to manage a projects, I manage my projects. If I wanted to manage starting next week at probably $75 an hour, I know where I can go. No, but I do think, I'm going to tell you, I've always felt that everything we do, we should keep in mind that we're going to the voters for another budget.
Yep.
Whether it's April of this year or now in August. And it's amazing what people like to know. I was at a meeting last week here for the Board of Civil Authority, and somebody says, what are they doing over at the school? What are they doing over at the middle school, they called it? There's equipment going over there, and there's noise going on over there. And I said, well, we have a project, and that was the end of it. But, you know, it's just crazy. You see it, Julie. No,
Yep.
I don't want to, but I do think that it's worth a try. And I also think that probably most board members are much more interested in what the instruction is in the elementary grades or high school and course offerings. But this also, even though it's a small part of our budget, it's an important part of the budget.
And to Don's point, when it comes to these meetings and our annual meetings, it'd be nice for board members to have a good understanding what these projects are. So when they come up, that, you know, board members can actually answer some of these questions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So Joanne.
Sorry, I was a little slow on the hand raise, but I just want to say I support task force. I think I brought this up during our retreat because he corrected. I said small committees and he corrected me to say task force. I'm very supportive of that. I go back to believing that we all have, there's a reason why we are all on this board. We all have certain passions, I would hope. And whether someone's passion is to make sure every tax dollar is spent correctly, then that's great. Part of me is, you know, wants that too, but then there's the passion of the education, or there's the passion of, you know, the special ed to make sure, there's the passion of the staff, making sure that they're being treated correctly. We're all going to have different passions. We all care about everything in the whole package, but where our passion really truly lies, I wish we could have task force for those. I appreciate, you know, Peter and Dawn stepping up and wanting to get involved in the buildings. Because for me, going to go visit a shed being teared down, I trust that the shed is being teared down and that it's being done for the best. But I also trust Peter and Dawn to, you know, put in their recommendation and to be like, we were there, we have a better understanding, you know, this is what we can bring back to the board. Even though Julie, Laura, I trust you guys too. The principal, Dina, it's just good. I am supportive of having task forces.
Chris, one thing I'd like to say, I believe Becky Hart always met with us. It wasn't that we were just out there on our own freewheeling. I think Becky met with us, and sometimes the superintendent was there too.
Right. So I'm not hearing any opposition per se to having this. So I guess at this point, I'm assuming Peter and Don volunteer to be on it. Anyone else like to be on it?
Don't make this a gender thing, people.
I do believe Chris has some interest.
Well, I was waiting because we can only have so many people. So if a bunch of other people really wanted to do it, I'd wait. But no one else does. I would also be interested in doing this.
All right, so we can schedule a meeting. We can talk about the way we want it to work.
Yep.
And Laura and I would need to be a part of that, obviously.
Yes.
And we will we'll schedule that soon.
Sounds good. So as of right now, Don, Peter, and myself are the facilities task force, unless somebody else wants to do it.
And I would suggest,
down to do it, I guess that's what it'll be.
Chris, and I would suggest, if it works in your schedule, that rather than trying another night and all that, we just book it in relationship to a scheduled meeting once a month. Not every meeting of the month, but to start it once a month. And, you know, principals used to wander in if they wanted to, and that's up to Julie to determine how she's going to handle that part.
The only hard part I have with that, and I don't know about anyone else on this, but earlier we start sometimes gets difficult for me. Some days it's no big deal. Some days it's tough. But
I guess I just feel like I need to say that oftentimes those periods of time were very unstructured, and with people coming in and out, people arriving late, people leaving, having other discussions, never knowing what the audience was, who was going to be walking through the door and when. Sometimes people coming 5 minutes before that time period was over, and then having to recap really quickly. I would just want to make sure that there's some structure to that portion of the meeting, and it follows an agenda just similar to a board meeting if we're going to use the time wisely.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Peter?
Well, Chris, I appreciate your consideration on this, and also being on the committee or the task force. Certainly, you have a lot of expertise in that, and I certainly appreciate you willing to do that.
Okay. So I would agree. I would, at least for the first couple, I'd like to have its own night. So we're not limited by time per se. You know, if we meet a half an hour early, it means we only have a half an hour. And once we've done a couple, we could probably reevaluate and determine whether just meeting before a meeting's fine, or if we would like to keep them on a separate night. Julie and I can work on scheduling and setting out some options to everyone and scheduling, see something that'll fit for at least the first meeting, and then we can have a further discussion from there.
Thank you.
Okay. So next up in news business is side letters of agreement, and we're going to need action on each of these. So we'll start with lunch coverage.
Okay. And I want to thank Karen Vincelette, our union president, and I want to thank Pierrette Bouchard for working together to type these up. I reviewed them all, but Pierrette has a special talent for side letters. Which one are we starting? Lunch coverage. Let me see. Okay, this one. All right, I'm going to present. We'll see how this goes. They are in your drive, but I will present each one.
You know, while you're doing that, I just saw in the chat box, I don't know if this is the time to talk about it, but Ryan Maskell asked if he could be part of that task force.
Yeah, I just got back to Ryan. I wrote.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I just told him that we'll meet as a task force, and you know, I'll bring it up first thing.
Thank you.
All right, let me see if I can.
Of course you took care of it, Chris.
So one of the things that we wanted to make sure we did, while I'm trying to make sure, here it is, that I can share it, is teachers in this new COVID environment have to be eating with their students. Now, each school is working through something different. Some schools may be able to figure out a way to get around that. But in particular, I think MVU is going to have a model. Oops, I was trying to fix something and it won't let me. MVU is going to have a model where one of the options is if you do not get a duty-free lunch and you do not have time off because you're assigned to work with your students, that you will be able to have 25 minutes early that you leave on those days. And I don't know if Dan or wants to share anything more about that, but both sides agree that that is something that will work for us, and we want to make sure that we have flexible options for teachers.
Essentially, our staff has a duty-free lunch built into the contract, and this year, since students are not allowed to eat in commons, they must eat in classrooms. We need those supervised by teachers. And so working with Karen, we came up with this plan that if they spent that 25 minutes in the classroom supervising their students, that they would then be able to leave 25 minutes at the end of the day.
So we would look for a motion to approve that side letter of agreement.
Yeah, so
I'll make that motion, Julie, since we negotiated a lot of things that we're
We
not.
sure did.
Don's the first, second. Megan's the second. Any discussion? Here, Terry.
Yeah, I just had a question. Who's going to take the classroom in the last 25 minutes, or is this 25 minutes that teachers are supposed to stay?
So this is 25 minutes beyond the end of the school day. So students will be leaving at roughly 2:36. They used to have to be there until 3:30. So they would, yep. So it's non-supervisory duties.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so are we ready to vote? I believe so. All those in favor, raise your hand. Jen's the only one I can't see.
I agree, Chris. I don't know why you can't see me. Sorry, but
Well, it's just because there's 24 people and I can only see 16 at a time.
Oh.
So the motion carries 9-0. Our next side letter is night duties.
Which will, I know, be very exciting that this is what's happening. Let me see. It's this one here. So what we agreed to for the night duties, some of our concerts and things like that are not happening right now when we don't know how or if we will be able to do that. So the union actually came to us with the idea that one of the requirements is to have a schedule before school starts of all of the assignments for night duties at MVU. And so it's an unknown what the evening activities will be and when they'll take place. So the side letter agrees to waive the requirement of preparing a tentative schedule before the start of school. And the parties agree that a procedure will be developed and there'll be an alternative plan on what night duties will look like, as well as every effort made in providing as much notice as possible when they are scheduled.
If you want me to follow up with that, so we have night duties that teachers are supposed to perform. Essentially, it could be middle school dances, could be skit nights, could be Mr. Thunderbird, could be prom, could be all kinds of things. And since a lot of those activities cannot occur in the COVID era, we are essentially going to have teachers sign up for the duties anyway. And in case they were to happen, or in case something does happen, we would just notify them about 2 weeks in advance that they are going to occur. So the language of the contract right now says that we're supposed to tell them right now, but this would allow us to let them know with about 2 weeks notice if we're allowed to have them.
Okay, so at this time, I'd entertain a motion to accept the night duties side letter. Peter's the first, Devin's the second. Any discussion?
Great solution, Dan. Great solution.
Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. Yep, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, motion carries 9-0, sorry. Next up is use of sick leave and FFCRA.
Yes, we have a lot of acronyms happening right now. So one of the laws that has come out of the expanded FMLA through this COVID pandemic is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act sick leave. And families are able to, staff are able to access 2/3 pay for leave time. This only is for a number of weeks. And I believe it ends on December 31st, but they're able to access 2/3 pay. We want people to be able to, we're not going to force anyone, but we want people to be able to access 1/3 of their sick leave That does two things. One, it uses up people's sick leave for staying home. And that means that people are making a choice and they are actually using some of their own leave, although 2/3 of it is subsidized under the law by the school district. But also for teachers, and this goes for support staff and professionals, but for professional staff, if you're only receiving 2/3 of your pay, you're only accruing 2/3 of your seniority. So it also will help mitigate some of our teachers' potential loss of seniority. We do not have a ton of folks that are accessing this, but I think it's an important option that we have. We don't necessarily need a side letter for this, but it just, given that this is a new master agreement and very unique circumstances, we wanted it to be very clear that it is an option for staff.
Okay. Are you going to take that down or?
Yep. Oh, sorry. You can't see people vote if I have this thing up here. I apologize.
Nope. All right. I'll entertain a motion to accept the use of sick leave side letter. Devin's first. Megan's second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those. Oh, Peter.
Julie, is this just for, I guess who's taking advantage of this or who's using this? Is it employees that, for COVID concerns, or is it for anything?
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't clear enough, Peter. Good question. There's a requirement under this law that if a family cannot access childcare because and it's for our teachers, they can't access childcare, they need to stay home and take care of their children because their children's school is closed because of the coronavirus. Then they have the ability to apply for this leave. They do not have to come to work, and we have to pay them 2/3 of their pay.
Okay.
So not only would we be paying them, we would also have to be finding and paying a substitute as well. So we really want to make sure that we minimize that, of course, but it is a right under federal law. And we do think it's important that they can access their sick leave. One, because it makes them whole, but also because they're using their own leave. And there are many technicalities through that. You can't just say you don't have childcare. You have to, if you're offered some, you have to show that you've searched for it and that you're unable to find it.
Terry.
I just wanted to add that there's, I think it came out from VSBA, the letter from the attorneys that gave all this information about this. And it was really good so if you want to read that, I think the VSBA sent it out. Peter, it gives a lot of information about all this. It's got a little lawyerese in it, but overall it's okay.
It's not a little lawyerese.
I also just uploaded the poster in your board drive so that you can read it yourself, what the employee rights are.
Oh, thank you, Kira. That's great.
But it is employee, right? It's not just teachers. It's employees, right?
It is employee, yes.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting side letter for sick leave, raise your hand. Nine, the motion carries 9-0. And our last letter is support staff hours.
So here, and this particularly with 6th through 12th grade, while we're in hybrid, I'm going to present it quickly. Some students will some paraeducators may have shorter days on Wednesday, and they may have longer days on Monday through Thursday. Our contract clearly states in it that we will have between 7 and 8 hours a day. And for example, if we have monitors on our school buses and paras are starting at 6:30 in the morning, they may have long school days that are 8.5 hours long or 9 hours long, 4 days a week. And they may, instead of working a full day on Wednesday, they may work a half a day. It's not saying that that has to be the option. There are other options we can do. We can stagger different staff members' schedules, but this side letter allows us to give people that option to see if it works for them.
Okay. So at this time, I'd entertain a motion to accept the side letter for support staff hours.
Chris, I'll make.
Terry's the first, second.
Chris, I'll second it. I have a question.
Don's the second, and discussion. Go ahead, Don.
Julie, am I right to understand that the employee has a right to say, I do not want to work additional beyond the 8 hours? Or will this give us the flexibility to say you have to?
This particular agreement is looking for it to be an agreement between the employee and the supervisor.
Okay.
So, for example, if I'm asked to work to do a duty that would be outside of my typical schedule, I can work with Dan and say, well, you know, I would really like to have a short Wednesday. That would help me out a lot. It would help me with my own childcare, whatever it is. Or I could say, you know, I'm happy to do the duty, but I really would rather get out at 1:45 or whatever the time is. Can you work with that? And Dan would think about it and talk to some people and then say, yeah, I think we can work with that. So it would really be an either.
So it's an option. It's an option giver.
Exactly. It's an option.
Any other questions? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the support staff hours side letter, raise your hand. Nine. Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you, everybody.
So at this point, we are on to old business. First up with old business is board goals and superintendent job description. Terry and Julie.
Thank you. If it's okay if I start and then Devin and Julie jump in whenever you'd like as we talk about this. And I know that it's getting late, so we don't want to spend too much time. But I do, before we jump right into this, I would like to just remind us of how we got here and why we thought it was important to do this. And I think it goes along with some of the things we talked about tonight. What do we want to discuss at meetings? We're relatively new. We have ways we used to do things. And now we've got 4 schools that are all into one board. And we've been really successful, I think, as a new board in terms of, and you guys before I was ever on it, in terms of doing so much like the policies, the budgeting, contract negotiations. And then with COVID and everything that's been happening, of course, that I think our administration has done the work and the teachers. But what we want to do now is to, I think what we decided that we want to do more proactive, to have a more proactive approach and think strategically so we can build something, a foundation and sustainability into the way we operate as a board. And our retreat that we had was awesome. And we got a lot done. And then we said, okay, Julie, she put together all those notes into that drive and pulled it all together. And then Devin and Julie and I kind of looked at some of those strategies and inside of that too, and pulled that together. And the way we left it at the last meeting was that you all were going to share your thoughts and concerns on that shared drive. And as of 6 o'clock tonight, I didn't see any feedback other than Devin and Julie and I had talked about it. So I don't know how to interpret that, but I have a feeling it has to do with the fact that, you know, like right now, it's probably the last thing people want to think about. You've just spent your whole day with all kinds of things coming at you. And then tonight with all this stuff that's going on. But we wanted to make sure that sometimes, you know, we don't want to let this drop. And that sometimes when no one has responsibility everybody thinks everybody else is doing it. So, and the other thing I want to caution us with is Julie and the admin is so busy right now with all the COVID and the school opening and everything. I really think this is something that we as a board need to do. Those board, and I'm talking about the board goals, not the district goals or the superintendent goals, but if we could get our own board goals done, I think we'd really move this ball down the road. And I think this is a good time for it. So there is a latest version that we put together today. Julie, do you have that you could show?
I do, and here's my thought. I'm going to actually share.
Great.
Everything is so slow when you have two screens. I apologize.
Well, while you're doing that, I think it's really important that the reason we want to show you this is because we're really hoping that people will sign on to task forces, and in terms of getting this work done, especially like Joanne said so eloquently, in terms of things that are your passion.
So what I'm sharing with you is the inside of our board folder, so that you could see here are our folders for each of our meetings where we put all of our stuff. But I made a separate folder for board goals and job description, so that you can go in there and you can see there are two different job description templates. There's the brainstorm, and Terry, the one with the highlighting is what you'd like me to show, right?
If you would, yes.
And here it is.
Thank you. So if you remember from last time, you can see the goal strategies that we had talked about last time, and these are pretty much the same. A few may be added from our notes, but I color-coded them to make it a little easier. The green, I said all board members are involved, but as Devin wisely said, we better have a task force assigned to green as well, someone that's interested, so we have a point person. And the yellow is kind of HR stuff, which would be board description, review processes, the job description, those kinds of things. And then the turquoise would be about the function is more meetings. What kind of information do we need at our meetings, and the templates, and who should be at the meetings, things like that. And then the gray talks about the strategies for budget, recommending the budget, getting it out there. So as you can see, there might be different colors for the same goal, but it's because the strategies all differ. So what I'm hoping is we can get people to volunteer for the different colors. And Devin and I will continue to be we'll be happy to be the point people or to be, helping with this. We're just really hoping that you all have interests that you're like, yes, please, I want to sign up to be with this. And what we're really looking for is date and who for the what. And you can add the whats too and get clearer about what we need to do. What are your, do you want to add anything, Julie or Devin?
Devin, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. That was well done. I think just like the facilities piece, in order to really have the visibility for all these things that we're working on, it'll be good to have a few people that can step up and grab something they're interested in and start to work on this. And we'll, I'm sure Terry and I will volunteer for parts of this and also continue to just help facilitate the whole thing and try to keep things moving. Julie, anything else?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, we're involved here at central office in the way that we can support you, whether it's in writing a job description with you or giving you examples, making sure if you're talking about what's in board meetings, that Chris is Chris is a part of that. So I think it'll be exciting to see what the committee's task force's recommendations are here.
And I don't even necessarily think that this has to be done with scheduled meeting times. I think a lot of it can be done just through email and back and forth communication, as long as we're staying in that small group and not violating any open meeting laws, just making sure we've got those couple, 2 or 3 people in each area discussing them.
Great point, because that's how we've done it. We've done it on, and I think if Pierrette has time, I think she'd be a lovely resource for yellow.
Yes.
So how should we go about this? Is anybody wanting to raise their hand and volunteer for one of them?
Terry, I'm not volunteering right now, but I would like to come back to this because I had sent Julie an email earlier. The day about this tonight, she said it was going to be on the agenda. When we met with Mike DeWeese, nobody there stood up and says we have a job description. But after that meeting, about a month later, Pierrette put out that we had one. And then I think Julie put out we have two. So that changed my whole thought process. If the SU board adopted one in the last 5 years, and I was on the SU board for a while, but only a short time when Greg wanted to take a year off. But if we have one that was recently adopted, then my thinking was tonight, at least make sure everybody looks at that and may say, hey, this is a pretty easy task because it was done by a group of our peers. And we just want to take and maybe modify this, eliminate that, add the other. But because I originally was thinking when we were talking with Mike DeWeese that this was going to kind of start for us from ground zero by going to other school districts and asking them to share what they have. But I believe the one we have was reviewed by an attorney.
Yeah, can I add to that, Don?
Sure.
Because I'm a nerd for this stuff. And so when Julie sent out resources, looking through, before I realized we had one, I was looking at different schools in Vermont, and I found one that is almost identical to what we were using. And theirs had been renewed in 2018. So I think there was a lot of sharing. The words are very similar. And so whoever volunteers, I'm going to put in a plug here, whoever volunteers for yellow, one of their jobs can be done in like a day, but I mean like an hour max.
I think
and that's the job description.
And I believe the lady that helped write that one that looked a lot like somebody else's is still working in that district. She at one time worked under my jurisdiction, and so it'll be an easy job if you're a volunteer. She's a good person willing to share.
Right, and it's a great job description.
Yeah, it's very capable.
Thank you, Don.
I think I saw Joanne's hand go up, but she may have put it down again. I don't know.
Yay, Joanne, you got that. What do you like?
Julie, if you could take down the presentation so I can see everyone, that would be cool.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
That's good.
I forget it's up.
Okay,
now
Joanne first, Megan second.
All right.
I just wanted to say I'm interested in turquoise. That's all. If that's not what we're talking about tonight, we could definitely move on. I know that time is getting ahead of us. I'm not sure if, we're going to fill all the colors, but I just wanted to put it out there.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. I know Devin's all smiling too. We're so happy. Okay. Thank you.
Mine was I'm interested in green.
Great. So Terry, maybe what you can do is you can have a meeting with just the four of you, because that's not a quorum, right? And I'll be a part of it, obviously, and probably Pierrette. And we can even just to talk about next steps and how you want to do business and whether you want to have people filter things through you and then how we share things back and forth. But that, I think, will be exciting.
That sounds great. And I like yellow, so we're good. I think we're going to be fine. Okay, so thank you for that. You okay with that, Devin?
Sounds great. We'll volunteer a few other people to fill in the
There you go.
rest.
Thank you, Joanne and Megan. That's so funny. Thank you. It's funny, just as an aside, I was thinking about that today. I think, I think turquoise will be Megan and Joanne is who I think will volunteer for that. That's so funny. I had green anyway, so good. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Next up on old business is facilities updates.
All right, Laura. Laura's been working with facility directors, talking about and doing a lot of learning about some of the HVAC grants, about the level of air handling ability that we have in each of our buildings. And I think that's the focus this time of your update. Is that correct?
Several focuses, but definitely one of the largest ones, yes.
Okay.
The facility directors and I have become very close last couple of weeks. And they are working very hard and working very well together, and I'm really proud of the work that we're doing, to be honest with you. I wanted to start off with, and maybe Chris, is it okay if I project now for a minute?
Go for it.
Okay, I'll try not to forget to shut it off. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to start off with just, I asked the facility directors to give me a little synopsis of where the project statuses are at the moment that are currently happening. So Jason Butler has let us know that the Swanton Garage project renovation, the footings have been poured, the slabs being poured in the next few days, and the trusses have arrived. He's very happy with the way that things are moving forward. The Highgate Parking and Stormwater project, speaking with Scott Martin, they did a full team project walkthrough yesterday. It apparently was perfect timing in that it started to rain basically on cue as they were all standing and ready to kind of review the project to make sure the stormwater and the drainage was working properly. They did notice one issue with a stormwater chamber, and water wasn't quite reaching the chamber and draining the way that it was intended to do. That's been acknowledged and documented by stormwater engineers and project manager, as well as our engineer, Tyler Mumley, and Scott and Wrights, the contractor, and they will be working on correcting that as soon as possible in the very near future. Basically, what they decided is they need to reduce the area around the drain by about 2 inches so that, I guess, the water was cresting to the top, but not quite making its way over to get in. So it seems like a manageable thing to address. And Scott seemed confident that it would be resolved very soon, and hopefully before school starts. The MVU COVID parking access that the board had discussed, that rear access, Paul has shared with us that there was a slight delay. By the time we got back to the contractor, he had other commitments, but it will be commencing on Friday, and the projected completion is next week. So not a long timeline there. Don't know if anybody has any other questions about those.
I somehow I heard or read that the way we're taking temperatures has changed from a month ago. Is that true, Julie? Or are we still doing it as they get on the bus or out of their cars?
At this time, the guidance did change, but we on some of the health screening and how questions happen, but the requirement to take temperatures is still there. We have to take temperatures of every person.
Okay, so that wouldn't impact how we brought our buses in then?
It should not, no. No matter what, we still, even if we weren't taking temperatures before kids get on the bus, we would have to take them as they get off the bus, and they would need to come in a separate entrance.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and so you'll also see in your Google Drive sort of the hot topic right now, which is our document on the hot topic, which is air quality and HVAC in our schools at the moment. Obviously, with the COVID situation, this is kind of the #1 priority, and then obviously disinfecting and cleaning our buildings as well. What the facility directors and I have been working on, and if you remember, I brought some information to you that we would be applying for the air quality grants, which is part of the coronavirus relief funds that are available that have to be spent before December 31st. And so we have applied for those grants, but the details of the applications involves accessing quotes and working with vendors and looking through different recommendations and looking through the safe and healthy start guidance or strong and healthy start guidance for schools and coming up with plans to put forward. So that's been our #1 priority over the last couple of weeks. And what, if you can see this, I'm not sure if it's big enough, but it is in your Google Drive as well. We've tried to outline, based on the guidance and the different systems that we have in our schools, sort of different proposals, different steps of proposals, and recommendations that the facility directors have made in collaboration on how to move forward. I've noted on the top kind of the pieces of the guidance from the Strong and Healthy Start guidance. You'll notice, and then I've kind of broke it into different sections. Assessment and inspection is obviously something that's ongoing in all of the schools. They're working with their vendors, as I said, they're working together, they're collaborating, they're doing walkthroughs, they're trying to evaluate where they are with their systems. The second column is system cleaning. Due to the age, we're calling our systems vintage HVAC systems. Some are as old as 40 and 50 years old. And also due to some deferred maintenance, due to budgeting and staffing and time constraints, the systems are in need of cleaning, severe cleaning, and they're aged, some more than others. But according to the guidance, it does want us to ensure that our systems are operating properly and increasing circulation of outdoor air, and that our ensuring that our school ventilation systems are properly cleaned, and they meet all the operating standards prior to opening school. That's a very tall feat at this point. But if we looked at the duct and coil system cleaning, that is obviously a #1 priority for the facility directors in moving forward and ensuring that their systems are operating properly. If we look at the next 2 columns, we have some other options for you, for considerations, I should say, things that the facility directors are looking at. Again, the Strong and Healthy Start guidance recommends that portable air cleaners are an option to clean air in rooms. There's a lot of guidance on there's a lot of standards and guidance on the amount of air that needs to be circulated and turned over in classrooms. Due to the age and the condition of our systems, many of our systems can't turn over the air even to the industry standard, never mind the COVID guidance. So the industry standard for schools right now is around turning the air over 2 to 3 times an hour. COVID guidance is 6 to 8 times an hour. Our systems are functioning more in the 1 to 2 times an hour range. And so portable air cleaners may be an option that the board wants to consider, but definitely an option the facility directors want to consider in ensuring that we're turning air over and we're cleaning the air, not only turning it over as an option, but obviously there's a cost to that. The next column F, is proposed improvements. At this point in time, we do not know what will be approved for the air quality grant. The guidance is being the planes being built as they fly it. So the guidance is coming. We know that there's about $6 million for the state to use, so it's not a huge pot of money, and there's a lot of need in Vermont. So what the facility directors have done here is, to the best of their ability to date, come up with proposals on improvements that they feel would be important at this time to ensure that quality air is in our buildings. Again, ensuring ventilation systems operate properly and increase circulation of outdoor air. I will go through those in further detail. At this point in time, column G, everyone has applied for the CRF air quality grant, but again, now we're doing the follow-up on that. They're saying that all schools will receive funding, but I know over 100 schools have applied, so what that funding looks like is to be determined. I'll get to the other columns later. What I've tried to do, again, is sort of break down by school and provide the board with sort of a state of affairs and recommendations, so that the board can decide kind of their comfort level with how they may want to address some of these needs in our buildings and prioritize. So the assessments, getting the vendors in the buildings, if you can get them in your buildings, the timeline, obviously everyone's looking to do this, but having them come in and give their expertise on what needs to be done. Most of our schools work with Temperature Controls of Vermont. Highgate works with Control Technologies right now, and then also most of them work with New England Air. So those would be the vendors that they're communicating with, and then also again with Efficiency Vermont and their HVAC engineers. In the opinion of the facility directors and myself and the individuals we've been talking to, the cleaning of the system is sort of a #1 priority. There's obviously a cost, as you can see here, but the items in red in that column seem to be the kind of absolute items. Functionality is an issue in some of our schools, and the success of the coils and the duct cleaning, duct airflow is limited in some of our buildings. And again, it's just due to the fact that they're 50 years old. And so cleaning them and trying to clean them and evaluate what can be cleaned versus what may need to be replaced, I think it's a logical step in making sure that we have clean buildings. This can happen fairly quickly. Most of the facility directors could move on this prior to school starting, and then in the first few weeks of school, and it can even happen when kids are in the building. But it would definitely move us in the right direction in the air quality and turning over the air in our rooms. Portable air cleaners, we talked a lot about this over the last couple of days, and again today for a couple of hours.
Mm-hmm.
There is a large cost to portable air cleaners. But again, it is something that's recommended in the guidance from the Agency of Ed as an option when air quality could be less than ideal in a building. We worked with, Steve Ballard primarily worked with a vendor and then shared information with us to obtain some pretty amazing pricing on these units. These units, as you'll see on the bottom here, they do meet the standards in the guidance, so they do have HEPA filters, but these also have 3 other kinds of filters, and they specifically filter out COVID. So there's a certain size of a COVID bacteria or germ, and the microns of these filter systems, of these air purifiers, actually would filter that out, along with many other things like swine flu and the flu and influenza and MRSA and all kinds of other problems that we could have. You can see here about the negative ions. So they actually kind of like electrocute the germs as they pass through. Then they go through a HEPA filter. They also have a charcoal filter, and then there's an active pure that happens at the end. So basically the air that comes out actually, when it hits objects, actually then kills more bacteria and kind of stays live and active for a certain period of time. This is an option that could qualify for grant funding. The Efficiency Vermont, the gentleman's name is Parker, that they've been working with. He said it is a good option in schools. Basically, you would be cleaning the air 2.5 times an hour per unit that you install in the area in a classroom. So rather than just turning over air, which we can't maximize right now, even to the industry standard, we could actually be cleaning air. It would actually clean air 52 times a day if they run 24 hours a day. Pretty impressive stuff, but obviously comes with a cost. Could qualify for CRF funding, which is another pot of money, just the regular CRF funding that the LEAs are going to receive. Again, that money has to be spent by December 31st. And that would be at the board's kind of discretion as to how they want to kind of address these issues. You can see cost there. We negotiated a cost per unit. So if we buy a few units up to like 5, then they're like $2,500 a piece. We've negotiated that down to $800 a piece if we were in the market for enough for all of our classrooms. The next column is sort of what the facility directors are talking about as kind of a next step. And so obviously they're prioritizing the assessment, getting a good reading on what their facilities are doing right now, their systems, getting those systems as clean as they possibly can. Air purifiers in some of the schools or all of the schools is a great next option. These are things we can move on right away. The proposed improvements, these are kind of bigger projects, many of which have been in the long-term facility plan right along, HVAC improvements been in, in the facility director's plans as long as I've been around. The items in red would be proposed improvements as known right now with pricing and quotes that they were able to receive, and kind of immediate things that could happen in the very near future and are prioritized to really improve air quality at the lowest cost possible, kind of the most bang for your buck. I'm not going to read each one to you unless someone has a specific question. Highgate is still working on obtaining those quotes. Again, these are all items that the facility directors are writing into their plans for the Efficiency Vermont air quality grants. But I understand that's only $6 million available statewide, and so prioritization may be an issue. I don't know if anybody has any questions or feedback up till then. I have some next steps that are the facility directors have sort of would like me to discuss with you, as this is sort of the immediate recommendation that that they have, and they want you to consider and ask questions and kind of give feedback on. And then there are some other considerations that I'd like to talk about as well.
I see Terry with her hand up.
Yeah. Laura, I'm just wondering, you said there's only so much that the state has.
Mm-hmm.
You also did a great job negotiating prices down. I would imagine every school would need something like this, or just about every school in Vermont. Is there any way to, I'm just wondering, is there any way to negotiate that with everybody or something?
The pricing?
And also the sharing. I mean, it seems like a pretty big priority for schools to have that filtration system. I mean, you go into any doctor's offices and they're like state of the art. I would just think that that's going to be something people are going to need.
So the $800 is basically almost at cost at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a great negotiation.
We talked to the rep today, and they are looking to work with schools. They understand the need. They typically work with commercial buildings, doctors' offices and, dance studios and all these different other places, government buildings. They're in the Pentagon, these units, so they're trying to get into schools. So I think they're looking at it sort of like an opportunity. And when the Strong and Healthy guidance came out and said this is a viable option and it's backed by Efficiency Vermont, I think they know what's going to happen, and it's an opportunity for them. Yes, I mean, I talk with my VASBO group. I know the facility directors talk with other facility directors. Some people are proposing projects, HVAC projects, as large as $2 to $3 million and trying to get as much funding as they can. I talked to one school that had $6 million between 11 schools that they were going to put in for. So I think it's going to be, I hate to say it, but like first piggy to the trough. So we're trying to move as fast as we can. This money has to be checked, signed, and cleared the bank by December 31st. So, so yes, I think to the extent possible, Terry, we're talking and we're working, but we're also kind of thinking like we don't want to be left behind.
I think it's also important, that we think about the two different sets of money. Well, there's multiple sets of money, but the money, the CRF money that was set aside just for HVAC is one pot of money that we're applying for. But if you just look at the portable air cleaner part, that is something that on its own would likely, and I say likely because we are getting no promises on how we're getting this money, but this is the sort of thing that the Corona Relief Funds for schools are supposed to help with.
I agree 100%. I think there will be funding available from one of these ESSER funds, CRF funds, the air quality grant. Again, we're just trying to move as quickly as possible and to ensure that we know that we have some issues in our buildings. We know we have vintage HVAC systems, and the facility directors are just trying to make the improvements that they can, with the understanding that the board obviously is kind of holding the purse strings on these things. I'm not looking necessarily for a formal approval. I guess what I'm looking for, other than the duct cleaning, again, these are things that have been in budgets. They're typically part of a replacement maintenance cycle. Unfortunately, doing 5 a year or not doing any because you didn't have it in the budget this year is really maybe not an option right now. The condition of some of the units almost necessitates that we move forward with a thorough cleaning and assessment of those units.
I saw Devin with his hand up.
Okay.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I was actually just going to ask you if there was a particular proposal or ask that we were meant to be considering tonight, or if this is just kind of demonstrating the options and we still need to get more information on all this before we know what even the proposal would be. Is that
right?
What's
so
happening?
I mean, again, I think the items in red are the things that the facility directors have sort of definitely prioritized. Obviously, Highgate still has some information to gather. They are working with Control Technologies, but they haven't been able to have the rep even get to their building yet because the demand is so high. They are all proponents of the portable air cleaners at this point, if we can get funding, or the board feels that that's a priority for them, regardless of funding, with the understanding that we're confident we'll get some kind of grant funding. So the actual proposals in column F are things that I would like to fine tune in some of the schools and work with the facility directors and maybe that facility committee, if they could meet very soon, we could review some of those. The facility directors are looking for approval to sort of get the ball rolling with the duct cleaning, the assessments, and so they can get those applications in for the grant and have the information as kind of definitive as possible. Sort of column B, D, and E that I'm sort of looking at, and then I think the facility team could meet if we met soon to kind of address the other ones. The facility directors are rightfully so very concerned about air quality, and I think that having the guidance come out also just reassured them that of what exactly they were looking to actually try to accomplish.
Laura, what's the total for all schools to get all the ductwork clean? I've been trying to look at it, but letters are so small I can't make it out.
Oh, sorry. So actually, Franklin's were already budgeted. So that 12,973 for Franklin, that was already budgeted, and that PO has already been done for that. So it would really be the other 3 options: Highgate, MVU, and Swanton.
116 looks like.
Yeah, you can, I was going to do the math really quick. The reason I didn't do the math is because all of these can be broken down if the board is uncomfortable with the numbers. You can break them down to just having the ducts cleaned, just having the coils cleaned. You can, at MVU, they have different pods. So we could primarily do the classrooms for the almost 60,000, the 59,526. But if you want to include areas like the gymnasium and the theater and the other larger areas, and that's where that other 16,533 comes in. So yeah, but about 9,600. Hold on.
I'm thinking of MVU, for example. Wouldn't it make sense if they're on site that they do everything? It's going to be cheaper than at some point you're going to have to do it to bring them back. I mean,
and to be honest with you, yes, absolutely. We've talked about that. And the demand is going to be very high. So getting them in the building and, once they're there, it'd be better to prioritize. And the need is the highest in the high school, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we talked about it. I guess, and I don't know, Chris, and Julie, and Laura, where you're going with this, but I certainly would make a motion that we allocate up to $100,000 to get the cleaning done.
It's 116, Dawn, if we did all of them, just to answer your question.
Yeah, but I think, didn't you say Franklin had 12 in for them?
I wasn't counting Franklin.
Okay, so it was 116. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I would say 116 then, up to 116.
I'd second that.
So at this point, we have a motion to allocate $116,000 to the cleaning of the HVAC. Don was the first, Peter was the second. Would it be possible, so I could see everybody, we could close?
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry.
Any discussion? I still can't see everybody. Oh, there it goes. Never mind. A little slow. Terry.
I would just like to know if that's enough money for now. And then the facilities task force work with you on what's coming next.
It definitely takes care of the number one priority, which is getting the ducts clean. The only other thing that I would ask the board to consider based on the recommendation of the facility director is the portable air cleaners. I did put information in the drive to talk about how they work and why they work and what they do and the effectiveness and they last 20 years and all 5-year warranty. So there's lots of information in there. But I'm not sure the level of discussion the board is ready to have tonight on that. But again, every school in the state of Vermont and probably across the country is getting the same guidance at the same time. And so, we're just trying to not miss opportunities. Eventually what will happen with these things, just like the vendors coming in to clean, and we're probably almost there, to be honest with you, is they're going to say they're not available. You'll get them when you get them. And that's not necessarily what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. I'd like to see us move
past. Unfortunate situation. The projects, the proposed improvements, absolutely. Franklin's already has some that were budgeted. They're working on those already. It would be the other things. If a facility team could meet sooner rather than later, I think the facility directors would be fine with that and welcome the opportunity to kind of talk through it.
Laura, what's your comfort level with still being able to operate within the budget if we were to approve the 116 and the additional 142,400 for the portable air cleaners?
Again, I'm confident that one of these pools of grant funding will be applicable here. So, and we will do everything we can to obtain that. Other than that, the facility directors reminded me today that they put a lot of other things on the back burner to make these a priority, and they're going, they haven't moved forward.
So yeah, we would have to manage if we did not, these are high priority grant fund reimbursements. So we feel pretty good about that. But even so, this is something we would defer other things to make sure that these priorities come first.
Absolutely. The thing I didn't mention and the facility directors had asked that I mentioned was, they want to feel comfortable with people being in their building as well, as comfortable as possible, and they want people to feel comfortable being in their buildings. And so, these air cleaners, when you're able to tell someone that the air is going to be cleaned in that room 21 times a day running through a 4-stage filter, there's a benefit to that when you're asking staff and kids in the building.
I know I would like to do whatever we can to make sure that we move forward on those. But I don't know if that is revising the motion or having further discussion. But I certainly don't want to sit back and miss out on getting these up and running as soon as possible.
I'd prefer the motion to be separate, to be honest with you. To me, that's why we sort of, I moved through these in sort of a phased approach. We were trying to be really kind of methodical about that. That these are different proposals, separate from each other. It's not one has anything to do with another. Yeah, they're add-ons.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the 116,000 for the HVAC cleaning, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Next up is COVID expenses information.
Okay. Are we not moving forward with the other proposal then, Chris? I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding.
I'm sorry.
I would like to.
My computer was dying, so I missed some of the discussions. I had to run around trying to find my power cord.
It sounded like there was a desire for there to be a separate motion for the portable air cleaners.
Okay. Anybody want to? Megan's the first.
I'll second, Chris.
Devin second. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. Devin, what's your vote? Devin's a yes, so motion carries 9-0.
Thank you. I think I look forward to the facility committee task force looking at the next stages after this, and this will really reassure our facility director and our principals and teachers. Thank you.
I just have one more thing, Julie, in regards to staffing, the custodial staffing, the proposal there.
Oh, yes.
So another thing the facility directors have been very concerned about is their staffing capacity with all the new guidelines in regards to disinfecting the buildings and the multiple times a day, and you know, any issues that might arise there. And so working together with HR, Bonnie Moulton, myself, Julie, when we talked with Chris about this, basically they've put in a proposal that at a minimum, we would like to increase the staff for custodial staff by 1 FTE for a time period, sort of to be determined based on need, right? But a temporary position, 1 FTE in Highgate, 1.5 new FTE at MVU. And then what they've requested is 1 or 2 kind of floating custodial positions that would be cross-trained, that if buildings were down on staff due to, you know, taking time off or sickness or whatever, they would have someone that would be trained to come in their building. We've talked about it a lot that, you know, sometimes when they have staff out, custodial staff out, they can just say, well, I'll do a quick job on the rugs today and I'll hit them hard tomorrow when everybody's here. The disinfecting does not work that way. It's, you know, there are requirements and guidelines we have to follow every day, regardless of staffing. So I definitely think, and it would support that there was a lot of discussion around this, and that this is definitely a need. If anything, the need is probably higher. And they're trying to be as efficient and effective as they possibly can. The money kind of side of that is it's 3.5 positions. If they took single healthcare, it would be about $157,000. Depending on pay rate, that would be kind of on the lower part of the scale. Again, you know, I'm confident that this would qualify for some kind of grant funding, probably the CRF again. But if not, you know, we'll shoot for some kind of grant funding that would be available to reimburse for this and track it as definitely a COVID expense. I don't know if we need permission for that. I just wanted to make the board aware. We do have hiring signs up. We have gone through first steps of interviewing. Unfortunately, out of 7 candidates, 2 came, actually showed up, but we're going to be doing a second round of interviews and trying to get some viable candidates for facility directors.
Okay. So at this point, I think we can move on to the COVID-19 expenses.
Yep.
Chris, is this something Laura feels we need to act on now or next meeting? Was that information or was it?
The facility, I mean, the custodials?
Yes.
That, Julie, I don't believe we need formal approval.
No, we don't need board authority to, you know, we will manage that, but we want you to know that that's a priority for us, and we're going to make adjustments so that we can cover those expenses, and they will be temporary positions.
Okay. All right, good. Going back, Laura did make mention when we were talking about the other 2 requests for money that the directors all realized that maybe there were some things that they had budgeted that were likes rather than needs that they may have to put on hold, so we get a clearer vision here maybe after 3 or 4 months. Did I hear right?
Absolutely. They were basically asked to kind of put everything, well, not asked. I think, you know, we've all decided that air quality and cleaning the buildings is the #1. The need of plexiglass and tables and restructuring classrooms and access of buildings and all those things obviously are taking precedence. So there's been lots of other things that have taken the back seat. But yes, if you're asking if we'll be bringing that back to you in kind of a state of affairs and if anything changes and what might be recommended, that's our plan.
And you know, it's their decision what they're going to put on hold because they have higher priorities now, but it would be nice at some point just to know. to the committee or something. But no,
Yep.
it's their decision. Okay.
Since you went back to that, Don, I'm trying to be as quick as possible, but this is kind of a lot. We've been spending a lot of time on this. I do want to mention that when it comes to the facility directors, and Chris, I did talk to you about this. It was part of my spreadsheet that I shared. We're all very concerned about the COVID situation, the financial situation that's going to put us in the length of that and the term of that and how long that's going to last. And will that dictate more deferred maintenance? And how are we going to address these kinds of things in the future? All of our facility directors in all 4 of our schools would like us to be able to launch that RFQ for performance contracting as an option to finance capital projects moving forward. I think we're all kind of thinking that bonding or borrowing money in that manner, going to the taxpayers, may not be a viable option in the future, and budget constraints will be pretty severe. And so adding line items to increase maintenance or to address some of the issues that are getting deferred over and over again may not be available to us. And we've talked a lot about it. I don't know how if the board thinks they need more information about that to understand kind of what the option is. I think there might be still some confusion, but your facility directors have asked that I bring that back up again to you as an option for financing capital projects. And it's a long process. It's at least a 6-month to 12-month process just to get it off the ground. So I think they're feeling like the timing might be right.
Probably a discussion for another night, right?
Absolutely. With the facility committee, I did promise them that I would bring it up, and that's why I don't want to get in trouble.
If you don't mind my asking, when the motion was made about the portable air cleaners, what was the exact motion? Was it to move forward with purchasing them or approving them? I don't really know what the exact motion is.
To approve purchasing them, I believe.
That was my intent.
That answer your question, Pierrette?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So once again, COVID expenses.
So what I provided for you in the Google Drive, in the shared drive, was the fiscal year 20 COVID expenses and fiscal year 21 COVID expenses, 2 separate documents. Fiscal year 21 is through basically today. These are above and beyond COVID expenses. As I talked about last time, we're trying to break COVID expenses, or the state is, into kind of 2 separate pots. What's budgeted for that you spent on other things that's related to COVID, or things that are unbudgeted. What I provided for you was the very clear, cut and dry, unbudgeted COVID expenses. Please pay attention to, whoops. I don't even, uh-oh.
What, Laura?
I think the reports, when I downloaded them, changed their format. Yeah, they definitely.
Oh, yes, they did. There's lots of.
They did. They don't look anything like they did when so I will copy those and add them again. I could tell you the numbers though, Dawn. I'm sorry about that. I should have checked to make sure that they still look the same, I guess.
No problem.
Fiscal year 21 to date is $28,953. That includes what's encumbered. There's been a kind of an influx of need. But again, not a huge dollar amount right now that's specific to COVID. So this is like PPE supplies, sanitizer, plexiglass, having staff available to distribute meals after school that was not budgeted for. These are very specific to COVID, non-budgeted items. In 1920, we had $35,195.26 of specific COVID-related items. I'm choosing to give you that information kind of very cut and dry. Other than that, for last year, and the things that we're trying to look at are the budgeted items that we still had to continue to pay, and maybe we wouldn't have continued to pay if COVID wasn't the situation. And that would probably be qualifying for the CRF funds that would be coming out of that pool of money. Again, if I'm looking at just the teachers and the staff that we continue to pay, the growth on that was $5.4 million for that period of time for support staff and teachers, along with their benefits and all the costs that go along with that. We are working through the guidance with my professional organization and the state of Vermont, trying to decide how we're going to, or if we're going to apply for those funds to try to get reimbursed. The guidance is not 100% clear. We did receive some formal guidance from the state of Vermont now on what they're kind of referring to as like a clawback of that money. And so any of those CRF funds that were budgeted items that we repurposed, they're going to take out of this year's taxes, basically. So they're going to reduce our ed payment this year by that amount of money. So a school district like ours and like many in the state that is currently had a carryover for last year, I think we're all willing to do that for the good of the ed fund and to maximize these CRF funds, but we're only going to do that if the state makes it easy, not necessarily easy, but accessible, and we all understand, and we're all being team players, and we're all following the same rules, and we're all doing it together. There was a lot of feedback at my last VASBO Association meeting and with the executive committee that if they're going to make us do time and effort, and the review process is going to be super cumbersome, and there's going to be procurement, even though half of it's already spent, and they're going to just make the rules up as they go, and only half of us are going to actually comply with that and the other half aren't, then kind of why would we? We're willing to work together as a state, but only if they make the rules clear and we're all going to have the same gain and not just some of us sacrifice and some of us gain, if that makes sense. So we're working through all of that. But I just wanted you to have some idea of the kind of money. I mean, $5.4 million is our gross pay that we kept paying because the governor instructed us to do that. Those are the other kinds of COVID expenses. Along with that comes other issues like unemployment. We got $40,000 worth of unemployment bills for mostly of which we were not responsible for. And so we filed all the appropriate paperwork kind of to dispute those, but they're 4 months behind. And so we've been instructed to pay those so we don't incur penalties and interest. But, will we get that money back? Won't we get that money back? Substitutes is a concern for me for COVID moving forward. I think, with the FFCRA and FMLA and staffing issues, finding subs and paying for subs is going to be something that I think is going to be COVID related, but, tracking that's going to be kind of difficult as we move forward. And then obviously I'm concerned about our facilities and energy use too, as a big COVID expense that's going to be coming down. So Peter, I know you had a question, sorry.
No, it's okay. Just curious, will the expense for the new entrance to MVU with for the buses, will that be added to this as a COVID expense?
That's one of the areas where we're waiting for clarification. The capital projects piece, so like an air purifier, absolutely. You're enhancing your HVAC system. I think that's pretty cut and dry. But when you're altering your parking lot, we're all looking. The whole VASBO group is looking for guidance on that. So
because we wouldn't be doing it otherwise, right?
Understood, but I think there's some gray area there. So absolutely. I mean, I want to capture as much as we can, but then again, we have to look at, are they just going to claw that back from other money? There was a memo that came from the Secretary of Education in the state of Vermont that used the word clawback twice in it. And it's concerning to me because if they're going to reimburse us, or they're going to give us different money, but if they're going to just take it away from what I'm already supposed to be getting, then that's not the same thing. Again, I want to capture as much money as I can. We're going to track expenses like that, Peter. Yes, absolutely. Am I going to charge that to COVID? Yes. But I don't have the details yet as to if they're going to let it qualify or not. Some of those capital things are a little gray.
But we'll be able to see it.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, I believe we can move on. Okay, we're going to move on. The only thing we have is other business, schedule future committee meetings, which I don't believe we need to do tonight because the goals group is going to work via email and the facilities group is going to set up a meeting later. So at this time, our future meeting date is September 1st, 6:30, and it will be held virtually. We have no need for executive session. So unless anybody has something to add, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Peter's the first. Harry's the second. All those in favor of adjourning at 9:12, raise your hand. Thank you very much, everybody. We are adjourned.